This programming is funded by a Safe Child Communities grant through the Children's Trust and a Coordinated Family and Community Engagement grant from the Massachusetts Department of Early Education and Care, administered by the Cape Cod Children's Place. Welcome to Cooking on a Budget. My name is Kim Conkra and I'm a nutrition educator with Cape Cod Cooperative Extension here in Barnstable County. Today we have two objectives in this workshop. One is to talk about family-friendly budget meals and meal planning, and the other is to involve children in the cooking process. So this first part is really for the grown-ups, and then at the end of this part you might want to pause the video and gather your children and your ingredients when the time is suitable for your family. So to begin with, we have to plan. How do we plan when it comes to family meals? Well, I like to look at a calendar, and I don't look at a whole month's calendar, I just look at a week. And so what I do is I look at breakfast first. Maybe there are 2 or 3 breakfasts that we typically eat. Think about what you do in your own household. So you can take those 2 or 3 breakfasts and plug them into your week of breakfasts. It doesn't matter if they're going to change days at some point or not. Then you can do the same thing with lunch. Maybe there are a few lunches that you typically eat or that you usually provide to your children. Sandwiches, leftovers, maybe you make a soup once a week and plug those in. Usually the most difficult piece is dinner. That's usually where we find the struggle. So when it comes to dinner, think about what your week looks like. Is there one day when you tend to have more time to cook? If so, that might be a time to do some batch cooking. Perhaps make a chicken and use that chicken for several other meals throughout the week. We call that planned overs instead of leftovers. That chicken could be a chicken dinner one night, chicken quesadillas, chicken salad, maybe a chicken soup, and maybe even a chicken stock or chicken broth to freeze or use for a later meal. The other thing we can do with batch cooking is things like grains. So you can make grains like rice or beans, and you can use a portion and refrigerate or freeze the rest for another time. So once you've figured out that batch cooking, when you have enough time to do that, what are nights then that are challenging? Those challenging nights might be a simple meal like a pasta or tacos or a quesadilla, something very similar. So now we filled in a good part of the week, and there should only be a few holes that we need to address. So this is just the first part of our planning process. The next part we're going to do is look into what we have on hand. So we'll look in the freezer, the refrigerator, and your pantry and cupboards to do an assessment for what we already have on hand. In my freezer, I tend to have several types of frozen vegetables and fruits. Frozen peas, chopped broccoli, frozen corn, those are things that I typically have in my freezer. I'm curious what you might have in yours. In addition to that, I might have some frozen proteins, different types of meat or fish, maybe even some of those frozen beans. Next, we'll look at the refrigerator. The perishables are where we usually get in trouble. So we'll want to look to see what we need or what we have for dairy products, eggs, and lurking in the back of the refrigerator sometimes we have vegetables and fruits that we might ignore. Things have gotten pushed in front of them. So look at those to make sure that you have a use for those, because wasted food and spoiled food is a waste of money. Next, after the refrigerator and looking at what we might need to use this week, we'll look into the pantry and the cupboards. When I look in the cupboards, I like to have some grains and pastas. I'll have different types of rice, different types of pasta, different shapes. Some of them might be a white pasta, some might be whole grain pasta, whole wheat pasta. Those are some of the grains that I might have. And I'll also have canned goods. I always have beans. In my house, I like to have chickpeas, black beans, white cannellini beans, and kidney beans. Those I always have at least 2 or 3 cans of each. I also have tomato products, typically tomato sauce, just plain tomato sauce because it's very flexible, and also diced tomatoes. A caution with diced tomatoes though is watch the ingredients. Sometimes you'll see a flavored diced tomato that has a lot of sugar or corn syrup in it. It's best to get a plain one and then add your own spices later on. Also in my pantry, I have lots of spices. So we can start with some basic ingredients and we can add an awful lot of flavor with spices. I've swapped out my onion salt and garlic salt and replaced them with garlic powder and onion powder. We can always adjust salt at the end of our cooking process if it's really needed. But if we're including salt in our spices themselves, a lot of times we can end up with a product that's very high in sodium. So now that we've looked at what's in our freezer, what's in our refrigerator, what's in our pantry and cupboards, now we have a better sense of what we have and possibly also what we might need to round out a meal. Now it's time to make your list. So make the list based on what you have, what's on sale, what is seasonal. If you have farmers markets that are working at the time, can you visit a farmers market and get fresh, local, seasonal food? Once we go to the grocery store, we recommend that you use your non-cash funds. That means things like WIC, if you're on the Women, Infants, and Children Nutrition Program, use that. Use also your SNAP benefits. SNAP, for those of you that don't know, was what we used to call food stamps. So the SNAP benefits also are part of your non-cash funds. And just so you know, you can use SNAP at some farmers markets and also get money put back onto your SNAP card if you use the HIP benefit. After we've used those resources, that's when you use your cash. All right, now let's talk about cooking with children. So if we want to have a successful kitchen experience, it's important to use child-friendly tools. So I've got some tools here, some of which you're getting in your kit. This is a bowl, and what's different about it is it has a flat bottom on it. A flat-bottomed bowl is going to be less tippy. So that's important consideration when you're talking about working with children. A couple other things in your kit are these flexible silicone bowls. Really great if you have to pre-portion something and then a child can then put it into the bowl or whatever recipe it is that you're making. A child-friendly knife is also important. This one is plastic and it does have a serrated edge, but it's not very sharp. And it's also small, also very important. And then a spoon. This spoon might be a little long, but a young child can actually grab onto a lower side of it and be able to stir with it. So on your fact sheet that you're getting a fact sheet that's going to talk a little bit about what nutrition and cooking teaches. And so along with that comes measuring. So measuring cups, measuring spoons, all are really important. They are teaching math, they're teaching portions. Another thing that I like to use, this might seem kind of strange, but a grater. I personally have a grater box. This is a different type of a grater. We might be worried about actually, our child hurting their fingers on the grater box, but if they wear a mitten, a clean mitten, they can do that and not run the risk of injuring their fingers or their hand. So that is also another thing. Some peelers are better suited for children than others. Some children may have an easy time with this kind, and then there's another kind that looks more like a Y with the blade across the top. That might be easier for a young child to drag across, say, a carrot. Having child-sized tools like smaller tongs that are much more easily to manage by a young child. And whisks are just fun. So using a whisk in a bowl, even if it's just a little bit of something, a little cornstarch and water even, is something that's just kind of a fun activity for a young child. And finally, I have my masher here. So this is not just for mashing potatoes, but if you were mashing beans to, say, make refried beans or a quesadilla, anything that you have to mash, a mashed banana even, it might be kind of fun to play with. Just use a big bowl. Using a bigger bowl just helps eliminate some of the spill. Okay, so this completes the grown-up portion of our session. So if it's convenient for you to continue on with your children and cooking, that's fine, or you may pause the video now and return at a time when it's convenient for your family, with your children, with all of your ingredients lined up. Thank you. Hi friends! We are going to make a breakfast fried rice for dinner tonight. First thing we have to do is wash our hands. Hey, before we cook, we need to wash our hands. So I'm going to get water as warm as I can handle it. Maybe a little cold water in there so it doesn't get too hot. And run my hands under the water. Wash my hands with soap. So when you wash your hands with soap, you wash your palms, you wash between your fingers, you wash the top of your hands, and don't forget those thumbs. Then you rinse off all the soap so all the germs go down the drain. Turn off the water and I'm going to dry my hands. Glad you washed your hands. Now we're going to look at what we have for ingredients. We have cooked rice, 5 cups of cooked rice. We have 1 carrot. You'll notice the carrot is in strips. A grown-up did that, so now we just have to slowly chop our carrot. And I'm doing a few at a time, but it might be easier to just do one at a time like this. And you have your own special knife that you're going to use to cut up the carrot. One note for the grown-ups is that we don't want to cut on a rounded surface. We want to put the food down on a flat surface and then cut it so that we don't run the risk of cutting ourselves. Right, so I'm going to cut that, finish cutting that in just 1 minute. But my other ingredients are 1 cup of frozen green peas. And I have 4 links of, this is a chicken breakfast sausage that we're going to cut up in small pieces. We have 4 eggs. We may need a grown-up to help us to crack the eggs and put them into this bowl and throw away the shell. And we also have scallions. So scallions are like an onion. They're long like this and green. We cut off that little root end and then we chop more of the white part. I like to cook that part of it and then I'll put in the chopped green ends closer to the end so they don't get overcooked. So I've already washed and cut up the white part here, as you can see. And then I think that my younger friends can probably cut up the green ends with their knife. So we're using 2 different types of oils. The recipe says to use sesame oil, but I'm actually have mixed both olive oil and sesame oil. Sesame oil can heat up really hot fast, so the olive oil will help with that. The next thing we're going to do is measure out our rice wine vinegar or lemon juice or apple cider vinegar, garlic powder, and soy sauce or tamari. If you have young children, a young child might better be pouring these into a bowl itself. For an older child, they may be able to actually do the measuring themselves. So these 3 items are going to go into a bowl, and that's going to be our sauce. The oil is going to be what we saute in. Now we're going to finish preparing our ingredients. So first I'm going to finish chopping my carrot, being very careful not to get my fingers, going nice and slow. Again, a child might be able to do this with the plastic knife, or if too young, maybe the parent or grown-up needs to do this part of it. And that was just 1 large carrot. Then I'm going to do my sausage. This is cooked sausage. I'm just going to cut them each in half. Again, you might be able to use your knife to cut those. If not this way, the grown-up might be able to do it lengthways, and then a child might be able to do it this way. Okay. Oops. And this is a chicken breakfast sausage, but you could use just about any breakfast sausage. So far I've got my ingredients here. All right, so I've got my eggs, my peas, my corn, my rice, my sausage, and my scallions. I'm going to finish up right here. Finish chopping those. And it's okay that I'm chopping them using the same knife because all of this is going into the pan at the same time, or in the same pan to be cooked. So I'm not so worried about that. Okay, so now I've got my pan, and this is where grown-up comes into play here. We have to remember that we don't want to leave our handles of the pans out because somebody might knock that and that could be dangerous. But if we have it on the inside, that's going to be much better. So I have my oils in here, the olive oil and also the sesame oil. And the first thing I'm going to do is put in, I have to keep adjusting here, I'm going to put in both my carrots because those are raw, and I'm going to put in my sausage just to make sure that it's cooked nice and well. The reason I'm putting in the carrots first is because the carrots are going to take the longer time to cook. If you're using frozen vegetables like a frozen carrot and pea mix, then you would put that in a little bit later in the cooking process. But if you're using some raw vegetables, you usually do some of those first. So we're just going to let this cook for a few minutes, and then we're going to put in, we're going to go on to the next step with our peas and scallions. Okay, we have our carrots and sausage sauteing. The carrots are getting just a little bit soft now, and the sausage, it was already cooked, but it's just getting nice and warm. Now we're going to add our peas. So it's 1 cup of the frozen peas. And again, my young friends might be able to pour those in if they were at a safe distance from the stove. And we're going to put in just the top part of this, or excuse me, the bottom part of the scallion. Those little white crunchy parts. We're going to put the green tops in at the end. We're just going to cook this for a couple minutes. Now you'll notice there's some colors in here, right? What colors do you see? This is one of the lessons we get from cooking, is looking at all the different colors and shapes and sizes and textures of all the different foods that we can put into our meals. Just going to give that another couple of seconds. Then we're going to push all of these things over to one side, and we're going to cook our egg. You see how bright the color gets on both the peas and the carrots when they're sauteing in that little bit of oil. Their natural water comes out of them. And now I'm going to push them right over to the side here. I'm going to turn the heat down just a little bit. The eggs don't need that high of a temperature. And I have 4 eggs here, and the eggs are scrambled. And we're going to just put those in here and scramble the eggs. And it doesn't matter if they all get mixed in together because that's what's going to happen anyway. But by putting them on one side here, I can let them scramble a bit and then be able to incorporate them or put them together with the rest of the items in the pan. So I'm just going to kind of push and pull on the eggs a little bit. Try to scramble them a little bit. Now in this dish, the protein is coming from the eggs. You could also use beans if you wanted to, if you didn't want eggs, or if you didn't want to use the sausage, you could put either leftover chicken, pork, or you could use beans, just to make sure we get that good protein in there. So my eggs are starting to scramble a bit. I'll let them sit for a second. While those are cooking a little bit, you'll notice I have my rice here. So this is my 5 cups of rice, and rice works really well in a stir fry once it's been cooked and chilled. So my chilled rice is going to be put in here after my egg gets scrambled. So what colors do I have so far? I have yellow eggs, I have orange carrots, and I have green peas. The scallions, those little onion kind of pieces, those are white and green. And I have my brown sausage in here. So this is just about done. I'm going to chop it just a little bit so it incorporates into the rest of the skillet dish here. And for the grown-ups here, this is a really inexpensive dish. You can use leftover vegetables, frozen vegetables, canned vegetables. Sometimes I'll use a mix of all of them. All right, so my eggs are just about scrambled. So now I'm going to push it over to the side, and I'm going to put my rice in here. This is an awful lot of rice. Probably could have used a bigger pan. Now we've added another color. Now we've added the white rice. So you can see we're incorporating the rice now. So the rice is getting mixed in with these vegetables. And remember, we used a nice fresh carrot that we cut up, and then we used frozen peas. And you don't have to thaw them before you put them in here. It just might take another minute to cook. So those are frozen peas. And my scallions were fresh. This sausage, remember, that I used was a chicken sausage. And that chicken sausage were little frozen pre-cooked links. So if you used a different type of sausage or uncooked meat, you would want to cook that first. So we have some good color in here. We will cook this a little bit longer, but I want to show you I'm adding in my the scallion tops. So these are those nice bright green tops of the scallions. And we're also going to add this simple sauce. So this was the simple sauce that you made that had the garlic powder, the rice wine vinegar, or lemon juice, or apple cider vinegar, and also that soy sauce. So we're just going to pour that all in here. Now after this is all cooked, you may want to add a little bit more soy sauce, but we're going to do it this way, thinking that this will be enough. Okay, so we're just going to continue to cook this, and we have a 1 skillet meal for our dinner. Okay, great job. We have our skillet breakfast rice here. And as a note to the grown-ups, very young children can do things like set the table. I have a placemat here. Children can draw their own placemat. They can set the table with plates and with silverware, napkins, and that's also part of the cooking and meal process. So I'm going to dish myself out some. We do encourage family style meals, so portioning a small bit and then allowing a child to take more for seconds and maybe even thirds is a really good idea. Take a little bit more here. All right, my friends, look at what we have here. We have lots of color on this plate. We have, I see orange and green and yellow, brown, white. We have all different colors on here. This is considered to be a balanced meal. We have a little bit of everything. We have some protein with our egg. We have some grains, carbohydrates with our rice. We have some vegetables in our peas and carrots and scallions. So we've hit some of the major food groups here. Thank you for joining me, and I encourage you to cook with your children and have fun and play in the kitchen. Thank you. Okay, now that we've enjoyed our yummy meal, now it's time to clean up. So my young friends can help clear the plates and bring them to the sink, maybe even put them in the dishwasher. And grown-ups should only handle the knives, okay, so not the young children. And we're going to either wash in the sink with soap to clean off all the food debris from our dishes, and or we might be using a dishwasher to wash the rest of the dishes. But just remember, both grown-ups and my young friends can help with doing the cleanup when it comes to cooking. Thank you.